Wow, that was beautiful, wasn't it? Thank you, Aspen. Brought tears to my eyes. Good morning and welcome to Thomas County Central High School and our 2017 Veterans Day ceremony. On this day, our nation honors veterans who gave all to defend our American freedom. We're here today to celebrate that freedom and to recognize and thank our servicemen and women. We have some special guests with us here today. We have Mr. Dan Stewart, Thomas County Board of Education board member. And also hiding in the back is Dr. Dusty Cornegay, Superintendent, Thomas County Schools. We have a surprise guest today that I wasn't expecting that I'm very happy to introduce to you. Our former student, Zavante Dolford, who was a hospitalman in the U.S. Navy and has been serving for 2 years. He was a 2015 graduate, and we're very happy to see him. Please stand and let us recognize you. Thank goodness somebody got him acting right. Okay, I'm just kidding. We also have within our own TCCHS school family members who are veterans, and some of them were able to join us today. Mr. Larry Brown, if you'll please stand for us, Staff Sergeant in the United States Army, 22 years of service. Mrs. Brenda Cromer, if you would please stand, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Air Force, 15 years service. Lieutenant Colonel Stan McLeod, United States Air Force, retired, 30 years of service. We also have another veteran in our midst, Mr. Michael Thomas, who is our band director. He was a first sergeant for 41 years in the Army National Guard Band. He's unable to be with us today because he is serving at Hand in Hand's Veterans Day ceremony. So we would like to recognize him and applaud for him, even though he's unable to be with us here today. Another Thomas County family member and military veteran is here with us today as our guest speaker. Dr. Scott James has worked for the Thomas County Schools since 2002 and is currently the Assistant Superintendent for Operations for the school system. In 1989, he received his undergraduate degree from Florida State University and later earned his master and doctorate degrees from Valdosta State University. He is married to Annette, and they have 2 daughters, Anna and Julia, and we're very glad that Anna was able to be with us here today to make her dad more nervous. Dr. James served in the United States Marine Corps from 1989 to 1993 and is a veteran of Operation Desert Storm. Please join me in welcoming Dr. James.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Not so much sure that Anna's presence is going to make me nervous or if my presence is going to make her nervous. So. Well, good morning, Thomas County Central High School. I'm certainly honored to be here today, and I hope that my time here will honor all of the women and men who have served in our military. If you don't know it, each branch of the military, and you've heard some of those already today, the Army, the Navy, all the Reserve and National Guard units, all of those are very complex organizations, and it takes people doing all kinds of things to make those organizations operate smoothly. We've heard about the work in the hospital in the Navy. It takes administrative clerks who process paperwork. It takes analysts who look at and try to make sense of intelligence reports. And it takes folks who make sure that all the supplies and materials get where they need to be, when they need to be there. And of course, there are combat troops. So I'm going to begin by answering the question that I'm asked most frequently, and that is, what did you do in the Marine Corps? Now, I was a little bit older when I went to boot camp. I enlisted in the Marine Corps after I went to college. So I don't necessarily want Anna to hear this, but it took me 6 years to do 4 years worth of college for my undergraduate. So I was a little bit older. I was 24 when I went in, and I did enlist. I didn't go in the officer corps. I was enlisted. I went to boot camp at Parris Island. That's in South Carolina. After some pretty intense training, I joined the 2nd Reconnaissance Battalion. And it was official. I was a recon Marine. Now, our mission was to operate in front of the main combat forces. We would locate the enemy and then get that information back to the people who needed it. We worked in 6-man team, so it would be pretty sneaky about what we were doing in order to gather that intelligence and at the same time keep the bad guys from knowing we were there. So as part of that being sneaky, I got to do some fun stuff like jump out of airplanes. I went to Navy dive school to learn how to scuba dive. If you've ever seen the commercials where they push the rubber boats out of the back of the helicopters and then jump in right behind them, I've done that and then kind of disappear off into the night. And since I mentioned the inflatable boats, I have to tell this story. It's one of my favorites to tell. We were getting ready to spend 6 months on an aircraft carrier over in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea as part of Operation Deny Flight. So the battle group, which is the aircraft carrier and all the other ships in the battle group, we were just kind of cruising up and down the Atlantic coastline of the United States, and the Navy was just trying to make sure everything was working right before we headed across the Atlantic. Well, while we were doing that, the President of the United States flew onto the aircraft carrier. So we got to put on a dog and pony show for him. Now, all of you have probably done a dog and pony show. You would call it show and tell, okay? So we were having show and tell for the President. So I'm there with my team, and we have one of our inflatable boats. And I'm pretty hyped up. I'm standing right next to the President of the United States, and I'm telling him, I'm talking to him. So I begin, and I'm trying to be all official. Mr. President, this is the F-470 Zodiac. It will carry 8 combat-equipped Marines. It's just one method of insertion or extraction that we have to use for our mission. So I'm pretty excited, feeling pretty important, and I'm ready to answer his questions. So I'm thinking he's going to ask me something like, maybe he's thinking, are the gunnels of the boat, which is the inflatable tubes, are they bulletproof? Or maybe he's going to ask me how fast the boat will go, or maybe when do we cut off the engine? How close do we get to the enemy before we change to the paddles? I'm thinking, and so I'm standing there ready. And what he asked me made me realize, after I kind of reflected on it, that our presidents, even though they are probably the most powerful person in the world, are human beings just like you are and just like I am. So what the president asked me is, do y'all ever fish out of that boat? So that's what I did in the Marine Corps. I was a recon Marine, and I talked to presidents about fishing. The other question I get asked frequently is, why did you pick the Marine Corps? The answer to that question is pretty short, pretty simple. They had the best TV commercials. So if you've ever seen those commercials, and this is not in my notes, but I like to tell this story too. I'm not sure if it's still showing, but there used to be a commercial where this Marine would come out with his sword and slay a dragon. So I like, truth in advertising. Don't believe that. I actually had to use a pocket knife when I did it. So let me talk just briefly about the history of the Marine Corps, the history of Veterans Day. The Marine Corps was established on November 10th, 1775 by the Continental Congress. If you may realize that today is November 10th, so if you happen to know a Marine, please wish him or her a happy birthday. The Marine Corps is a relatively small fighting force. Right now, the force is about 182,000 troops. If you compare that with the Army, Navy, and the Air Force, the Army has about 475,000. The Navy and the Air Force each have a little over 300,000 each. So in addition to its combat mission, the Marine Corps also is responsible for providing security at the White House and at all of our embassies around the world. Now, the holiday that we are celebrating today and tomorrow as Veterans Day, that was originally called Armistice Day. And it was first celebrated on November 11th, 1919. That was the first anniversary of the end of World War I. And it wasn't until 1954 that President Eisenhower officially changed the name to Veterans Day. So Veterans Day, we pay tribute to all veterans, living and dead, and also found it interesting that most of the countries who were our allies during World War I also celebrate their veterans on November 11th. Now, they may call it something different, but November 11th is the day that they celebrate their veterans. So I hope all of us here today realize what is owed to our veterans. Now, while we tend to focus on veterans of recent conflicts, and that's probably because they are still living, we cannot forget any patriot who has fought for our country all the way back to the Revolutionary War. Now, the motto for the Marine Corps is Semper Fidelis, or it's sometimes shortened to Semper Fi. Semper Fidelis is a Latin phrase that means always faithful. Now, people talk about the intelligence of Marines sometimes, but we see that we even use Latin. Anyway, the phrase Semper Fi is frequently used when Marines greet each other, and it's always said very proudly. My hope for you is that you can find something positive to which you can say Semper Fidelis. Now, it's going to be different for each one of you. It may be a group or team to which you belong. Perhaps your loyalty is to your family. Everyone should be able to latch onto something and apply the motto Semper Fidelis. For many of you, the answer came immediately to mind. You knew exactly what you're loyal to. Some of you might be sitting here right now still trying to figure it out. If you are struggling, let me give you a little help. You can apply Semper Fidelis to YOU. At the very least, you need to be faithful to yourself. Now, some days you may not believe it, but every staff member here at Thomas County Central High School is faithful to you. They only want the best for you. Now, do they have expectations and rules for how you behave at school? Certainly they do. And on the days you don't meet those expectations, you may think they are not on your side, but they are. Now, we memorized a lot of history and other facts during boot camp. One thing we memorized was the definition of discipline. It was defined like this. Discipline is the instant and willing obedience to orders. Now, it was defined that way because lawful military orders are usually given with an intended positive outcome. For instance, somebody says, hit the dirt. There's a good reason you need to get down. Perhaps somebody's shooting at you and you need to get out of the way, and you need to do it quickly. All right? Instant and willing obedience to orders. So I'll tell you a lesson I learned about not following orders. After the Gulf War, we were getting ready to leave Iraq, or Kuwait actually, and drive back to Saudi Arabia. So me and 3 of my buddies were given orders to check out our Humvees, make sure they were ready for the drive back to Saudi Arabia. As part of that checking the readiness of the Humvees, we decided to make an unauthorized trip to the only place where we could call home. We didn't have cell phones then, but a large phone company had set up a big tent with a big phone bank in it. So we decided, hey, we're going to be out riding around anyway. We'll just go a few extra miles and call home. While we were gone, a landmine exploded. And of course, we were not accounted for. You know, they were making sure everybody was okay. They couldn't find us. They didn't know where we were. We were gone someplace we weren't supposed to go. Needless to say, whenever we got back, our first sergeant was not happy. For the next week, the 4 of us spent our days digging a trench that was 3 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and about as long as a football field. Now, if you've ever seen the little shovels that the Army and the Marine Corps and the other military carry, it's got a pretty small blade on it. So it took a lot to me, even though we were in the desert, it took a lot of shovelfuls to dig that trench. 2 of us started on that end, 2 of us started on this end. We met in the middle. Well, we eventually finished. Called the first sergeant, let him know we had finished. He walked over, and you can guess what he said as soon as he saw it. Fill it in. Fill it in. So he spent the next few days filling it in. So it's important to obey orders, okay? Even though you don't understand what's going on, there's a reason, and it's a good thing to do. So Semper Fi YOU. You need to be your biggest fan, your biggest cheerleader. Your teachers, coaches, counselors, and administrators want you to be successful. Those people can help, and they will help. But if the plan is really going to work, then YOU has to want YOU to succeed. It's been a privilege and an honor to speak to you today. I hope I didn't bore you too much. If you see a veteran, make sure you thank him or her for serving our country. Thank you for listening, and remember, Semper Fi YOU.
Thank you so much. Can y'all hear me? Thank you so much, Dr. James, for speaking to us today. Thank you for your service to our country and your continued service to the students of Thomas County Schools. It really means a lot. I would like to present you with a token of our appreciation. This is handmade on campus. Our medals teacher cut this especially for Dr. James, and I want to say happy birthday.
Oh,
so thank you.
Thank you.
Holidays, I believe I've missed each and every phase. Come on and play one easy. Let's turn out every love light in the place.
It's time I found myself totally surrounded in your circle
Of all my friends, please celebrate me home.
Give me a number,
Please celebrate me home.
play me one more
Song that I'll always remember.
that I can recall whenever I
Find myself alone.
I can
Sing me home.
Uneasy highways, traveling where the westerly winds can fly.
Well, somebody tried to tell me, but the man forgot to tell me why. I've gotta count on being gone. Come on, mama. Come on, daddy. Please, what you want from me, yeah. I'll be strong.
I'm not weak.
Please celebrate me home.
Give me a number,
Please celebrate me home.
play me one more
Song that I'll always remember, that I can recall whenever I find myself too all alone.
I can make believe that I'm never gone.
Baby, let me know where I belong.
Sing me
Home. Well, I'm finally here, but I'm bound to roam. Come on, celebrate me home. Well, I'm finally here, I'm bound to roam. Come on, celebrate me home. Well, I'm finally here, but I'm bound to roam. Come on, celebrate me home. Well, I'm finally here, but I'm bound to roam. Come on, celebrate me home.
Give me a number,
I'm coming home. Celebrate me
Celebrate me
home. Please celebrate me home.
Thank you all so much for being with us today. That concludes our program.